I recorded my terrifying night shift stories and captured something unexplainable. I never should have opened that door. The cold air swept over me like an icy hand. I was just another security guard, clocking in for a long shift at the old factory on the edge of town. It was supposed to be quiet. I'd been through this routine 100 times, checking rooms, monitoring cameras, hearing only my own breathing and the faint hum of machinery. But tonight was different. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, whispering secrets I couldn't quite catch. The lights flickered, casting eerie shapes along the concrete walls. My heart raced, a rhythm that echoed against the silence. I felt it in the pit of my stomach. Something was off. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberated through the hall. I jumped, my chest tightening. I glanced around. Nothing seemed amiss, just shadows and the sharp scent of rust in the air. But that sound, it was too loud to ignore. I crept toward the source, every step a whisper against the cracked floor. Then came the whisper so faint, like the breeze carrying forgotten words. I strained to listen, but they just danced away, filled with terror and mystery. Objects shifted in the dark, a corner of my mind screaming, "Get out!" But curiosity pinned me in place. A chilling draft wrapped around me, a ghostly embrace. I gripped my flashlight tighter. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing the abandoned machinery, steel jaws frozen in time. But something was moving, a blur at the edge of the light. My breath hitched as I turned quickly, shining my light into the depths of shadows. Nothing, just my own echo. Seconds felt like hours. My heart thudded louder now, drowning out the silence. In that moment, a rush of wind slammed a door shut somewhere behind me. Panic surged, coursing through my veins. I didn't want to know what was on the other side. Should I run, or should I investigate? Before I could decide, I saw it. A figure shrouded in darkness just ahead. I couldn't make out the face, but I felt its gaze pierce through me. My pulse quickened. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Just silence. The world around me stood still, the air thick with dread. I was frozen, suspended in fear. What was that? Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The shadows shifted, swirling like a storm as I tentatively inched closer to the looming figure. My heart was a trapped animal, thrashing violently against its cage as I raised the flashlight once more. The beam flickered, and in that uncertain moment, I caught a glimpse of what lay before me, a silhouette, tall and gaunt, its limbs elongated to unnatural proportions. The air thickened with something sour and decayed, as if all life around had been sucked into its presence. "Who are you?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice a tremor against the oppressive quiet. The entity merely stood there, unmoving, shrouded in the amalgamation of darkness and whispers. The hair on my arms stood at attention as I readied my next steps. The thought of retreat skittered through my mind, but the curiosity that had led me here now morphed into something more terrifying, almost a compulsion to understand the source of this dread. I took a deep breath and pressed further into the gloom. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, an indistinct cacophony that clawed at my sanity. My chest tightened as a gust of frigid air swept past me, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and mildew. The figure took a step closer, and I felt an electric pulse in the air, as if the very fabric of reality had frayed. That same sense of cold fear enveloped me, pinning me in place, and I could do nothing but watch as it approached. Leave it was a murmur, but it resonated like a sound through hollow bones, clear yet distant. Every fiber of my being screamed to heed that warning. Yet an invisible force compelled me to stand my ground. "Why?" I whispered, my voice almost drowned out by the laughter of shadows echoing around us. The figure raised its arm, revealing fingers long and skeletal, as it pointed towards the far end of the factory. My gaze followed its motion, and to my horror, another shifting shadow materialized. It moved with an insidious grace, its shape reminiscent of something grotesque and inhuman. I instinctively stepped back, but something soft and damp brushed against my ankle. I jerked my eyes down to find a thick, blackish substance oozing from the floor like a living organism, pulsating gently, invitingly, yet drenched in malice. Panic surged. I had to get out, before I could act. The original figure began to dissolve into the shadows, its features twisted in a ghastly smile. "You should not have opened that door," it echoed, fading into the darkness until I could no longer discern it from the shadows. Desperation clawed at my throat, and I turned back toward the entrance, desperate to escape the suffocating loathsomeness of the room. But everything changed in an instant. The distant echo of machinery roared to life, a violent cacophony that drowned out all my thoughts. The walls vibrated, and flashes of frenzied light burst forth from the depths of the factory, as if awakening long-dormant horrors. "Get out!" I screamed, but my words were swallowed whole by the oppressive roar of metallic growls. The ground shook beneath me, and that black ichor began to bubble and writhe around my feet, pulling me down into its waiting maw. At that moment, the overhead lights exploded in a shower of sparks, casting eerie shadows in jagged patterns across the walls. Panic surged, and I stumbled back, only to be met by a wall of shifting darkness and a final act of defiance. I turned toward the nearest exit, sprinting with everything I had. But just as I reached out for the door, a cold grip wrapped around my wrist, yanking me back with a force that propelled me into the center of the room. "Welcome back," a voice hissed, deeper than the shadows, heavier than dread. My breath hitched. The figure was closer now, and behind it, a portal of writhing shadows opened wide, revealing what lay beyond a sight that shattered the very strands of my sanity. And like a moth drawn to flame, I felt myself teetering on the edge of oblivion, consumed by darkness that whispered my name. The shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, the flickering remnants of my flashlight barely illuminating the chaos around me. A cacophony of clanging metal and ghostly whispers filled the factory, a symphony of horrors that crescendoed with the wild beating of my heart. The figure, that abomination of nightmares, loomed closer, the shadows intertwining around it like a living shroud. "Let me go!" I gasped, panic flooding my veins. But my body felt heavy, entrapped by unseen tendrils of darkness that snaked around my ankles, holding me hostage. As I struggled against the malignant force, my peripheral vision caught glimpses of the skittering shadows, shapes that crawled on the ground like insects, their bodies twisting and contorting in ways that defied physics. "Why are you here?" The question slipped from my lips, a feeble protest against whatever nightmare had ensnared me. I expected no answer, but the figure tilted its head, its hollow eye sockets glimmering with a malevolent light. "Till remember," it whispered, its breath a mixture of warmth and decay. The darkness thickened around me, and I could feel the weight of countless eyes watching from within the obsidian void, each gaze a piercing shard of terror. "Remember what?" I cried, desperate to regain my sense of reality in the whirlwind of phantoms that surrounded me. The shadows slithered closer, brushing against my skin like cold fingers tracing a forgotten melody. A memory stirred within me, hazy and distant, a glimpse of faces long lost wrapped in confusion and madness. "Your choice to awaken the past." The words hung in the air like a funeral bell, tolling for something that had been waiting in the dark, anxious to break free. With a sudden motion, the figure lowered its bony hand, beckoning me to follow deeper into the churning mass of shadows. "I didn't mean to," I stammered, but it was too late. The lights flickered again, erupting into a kaleidoscope of blinding flashes that momentarily illuminated the swirling mass. In that terrifying moment, I saw their faces, anguished visages pressed against the fabric of darkness, mouths open in silent screams, their eyes vacant, begging for release. Then it all snapped back into shadow, plunging me into the cold, disorienting void. "Join them," the figure coaxed, its voice a chorus of voices layered over one another. each dripping with a dismal longing that clawed at my very essence. Suddenly, the floor began to vibrate violently, heaving beneath me as if the entire factory itself were a living, breathing creature awakening from slumber. And from the depths, something much larger began to rise. Black tendrils shot forth from the ground, reaching toward me like the hands of the damned. A primal scream erupted from my throat as I fought against the pull of the shadows, but my body seemed to have lost all autonomy. "No," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper against the chaos that surrounded me. The factory, fueled by an unholy rage, began to warp and change. The walls pulsed, writhing and pulsating as if they were the belly of some monstrous beast, hungry for its next meal. The figure hovered before me, a bridge between dimensions, its skeletal frame flickering as if it were losing its grasp on this reality. "You made the first choice. Remember the rest," it hissed in a sound that encompassed both accusation and yearning. There was a sudden clarity, a flash of understanding that pierced through the haze of terror. I remembered that awful choice I had made to enter this accursed place, that curiosity that drove me deeper into the unknown, oblivious to the monsters that lurked within the shadows. The floor beneath me began to crack, spiderwebs of darkness spreading outward, threatening to consume everything in its wake. "Stay with us," the whispers begged, rising and falling like a tempest, drowning out my thoughts. But as the echoes of the damned grew louder, something wrenched painfully within me, an instinct to flee. In a surge of adrenaline, I flung myself to the side, narrowly avoiding the hungry tendrils reaching for me. As I scrambled toward the dim light of the exit, a wall of darkness surged towards me, blocking my escape. And then I saw it, a vision of a mirror emerging amidst the shadows, reflective and distorted, revealing not just my face but an abyss of swirling, agonized souls mirroring my every movement. I paused, frozen in place, heart racing as recognition washed over me. I was already one of them, with the shadows clawing at my back and the whispers beckoning. I could only wonder how deep the darkness would drag me before I would become a part of it forever, and just as the last remaining vestiges of light flickered, illuminating the faces of the lost screaming in harmony behind me, the figure lunged forward, its gaunt hand brushing my skin. Time slowed, and in that maddening moment, I felt a cold surge of inevitability wash over me. The lights went out. The darkness was thick, an oppressive blanket that stifled sound and light alike. The moment the lights extinguished, I felt the world dissolve into a chilling silence, like the instant before a storm where the air is too still, pregnant with an unspeakable tension. I grasped at the void around me, searching for something that could anchor me in this nightmarish blackness. My breath came in frantic bursts, each inhale a struggle against the suffocating fear that wrapped tighter around me. Then, without warning, the shadows began to stir. They weren't just inanimate darkness anymore. They pulsated and quivered, breathing with a life of their own. The presence of the figure hovered close, its weight palpable in the cold air. I could feel its hunger, a palpable yearning for me to yield to the shadows, to join the anguished faces that I stumbled backward, my heart pounding as a low growl reverberated through the air, vibrating in my bones. I turned, frantic, desperately trying to retrace my steps to the exit I had seen moments before. But the layout of the factory had shifted in my fear. Hallways twisted into themselves, doors melted into walls, and the very ground beneath me morphed as if the building had eaten its own structure in a grotesque act of cannibalism. "Help!" I screamed into the void, my words swallowed by the consuming darkness. The shadows seemed to ripple, the whispering intensified, morphing into a cacophony of forlorn voices clawing for recognition. Each carried echoes of despair, memories of lives once lived and extinguished within the cold embrace of this place. Then, through the dense veil of shadow, I noticed a glimmer, a faint flicker of light cutting through the gloom. Hope ignited in my chest, a desperate flame that urged me forward. I sprinted toward it, dodging grasping tendrils that reached out like skeletal fingers yearning to snatch me back into their grasp. I could hear the whispers morphing into anguished screams behind me, and raged that I would dare defy the call of the shadows. With each step, the glimmer grew, transforming into a flickering chandelier hanging from an invisible ceiling, its glass crystals cascading light like shards of trapped stars. I reached it, breathless, and briefly glimpsed my reflection in a puddle below. The eyes staring back were not mine. They were hollow and dark, devoid of the spirit that once animated them. Not yet, I gasped, shaking my head, willing myself to wake from this nightmare. But as I turned back to the path ahead, I recognized the darkness shifting behind me, the figure coiling itself as if readying to strike. I felt an inescapable pull, a magnetic force drawing me back toward the swirling shadows, a voice luring me home. "Join us," it cried, the tones fracturing as it beckoned, an accursed harmony that resonated with the echoes of my very soul. I fought against it, digging my nails into the warm wood of the chandelier, wincing as splinters drove into my palm. Then I noticed with horror that the essence of the light dwindled. The shadows slithered closer, wrapping around the chandelier's base, extinguishing the glow like moths to flame. In that moment of panic, I pushed against the fading light, instinctively clawing at the petrified wood, but the shadows clawed back, a vice grip closing around my legs as if the factory itself sought my surrender. The remaining light flickered violently, casting ghostly images of the tormented faces born of despair, erupting from within the shadows to reach for me, imploring, begging for relief I couldn't possibly offer. Screams echoed in my mind, knife-like and piercing, each cry an entreaty that ruptured the thin membrane of my sanity. I can't, I yelled, twisting violently against their icy grasp. My heart raced, beating a frantic rhythm that matched the thundering pulsations of the gaping darkness that enveloped me. Suddenly, with a violent heave, I broke free from my earthly bindings, catapulting toward the last vestige of light. But just as my fingertips brushed against the luminous chandelier, the ground disintegrated. Beneath me with a sickening crack, the world tilted, and I plummeted into an abyss, an endless fall through the writhing shadows that clawed at my soul. And as the darkness surged up to meet me, I heard the figure's sinister whisper draw close once more. "Remember this before the end." The last shred of light vanished, swallowed whole as the void embraced me. And in the twisting shadows, a truth began to surface. A truth tied to all the lives that had come before me and the horrors they had awakened. I was not merely an observer of the past. I was its thread, entwined and condemned, spiraling downward into an eternity of haunting memories and endless screams. Just before the void closed in, I felt the cold touch of a hand, familiar yet foreign, wrapped tightly around my wrist, and then everything went still. I opened my eyes, gasping for breath, but the air around me was stagnant, tasting of rust and decay. The floor beneath me was hard and unnatural, a rough texture that scraped against my palms. I pushed myself upright, heart hammering against my ribcage. Darkness surrounded me once more, but this time there was an underlying hum, like the distant thrum of machinery long abandoned. My mind was reeling, struggling to process the memories that floated like specters in my thoughts. The flickering chandelier, the endless fall, the hand that gripped mine with a feverish intensity. I shook my head violently, trying to dispel the images. I couldn't afford to drown in those memories. I had to focus. As I surveyed my surroundings, I was unsettled to find that I was no longer in the factory's twisting corridors. I appeared to be in what seemed like a small storeroom, yet every object within it emanated an aura of malevolence. Wooden crates were piled haphazardly against one wall, their surfaces swelling and peeling as if something inside them was trying to break free. And there, among the crates, a mirror stood propped against an opposite wall, its surface smudged and dulled with age. That I stood cautiously, making my way to the mirror, compelled by some ancient force that beckoned me to look deeper. My reflection stared back at me, but my own eyes weren't the only ones gazing from the glass. I blinked, and with that simple act, the myriad of faces behind me sharpened, swirling like a whirlwind of sorrow and rage. Ghostly visages poured forth from the shadows, their lips moving, though I could hear nothing save the ominous thrum of the room. With every agonized expression that flickered in and out, an emotion scraped against the surface of my mind recognition. I peered closer, compelled by dread. Each face hollow, gaunt, and twisted belonged to someone who had traversed this hell before me. They were the lost relics of a time I could not remember but felt connected to in some unfathomable way. Their eyes echoed a plea that coursed through my veins, urging me to take action. "Help us," they mouthed. But there was a weight behind those words, an unholy demand that sent a shiver racing down my spine. I stepped back, heart pounding once more, when suddenly a chilling breeze swept through the room, causing the crates to rattle ominously. Cold fingers grazed over the nape of my neck, sending foggy tendrils of fear deep into my core. It took mere moments before a low groan resonated, reverberating in the very walls around me. The shadows writhed beneath the edges of the mirror, an ink-black miasma seeping closer, as if anticipating a feast. In that palpable moment, I knew I was not alone. "Why are you here?" A voice echoed through the darkness, deeper and more resonant than my own thoughts. It wasn't the figure from before. This voice was warmer, seductive yet fraught with agony, an invitation laced with decay. The shadows shifted, revealing the outline of a tall, faceless figure that loomed in the corner of the room. A flicker of recognition sparked within me, and fear clashed with curiosity. I tore my gaze from the ghastly visage, stepping deeper into the shadows as the malevolent hand that had gripped me earlier lingered in my mind. "What do you want?" I shouted into the echoing void. The whispers in response were maddening, a symphony of anguish carried on the breeze. "That we seek the truth. We seek the end." The room trembled under the weight of their words, and as if on cue, the mirror's surface became entirely transparent, presenting a nightmarish vista on the other side, a continuous loop of torment, each face a story bound in despair. The real horror didn't lie solely in the twisted ruins of their existence but in what they yearned for. I turned, my back to the mirror, and felt the air chill further, a cold sweat enveloping me. It wasn't mere darkness that awaited me. It was an entire realm of the forsaken, a graveyard for lost souls, and the figure stepped closer, its shape morphing, distorting, pulling apart like tattered fabric, revealing something far worse. Lurking beneath that in a heartbeat, the room began to shudder violently, the crates shattering as they erupted open, releasing wispy tendrils of black smoke that screamed toward the ceiling in a cacophony of anguish. I should have fled, but I was rooted to the spot, staring wide-eyed as the faces of the damned began to escape their imprisonment, floating toward me in a myriad of lost hopes. "Join us, become a part of the truth." The sinister invitation hung thick, heavy as gravity in the air. I stumbled back toward the mirror, still eerily unchanged, but the horrors behind it had merged into one colossal, wailing mass. I pressed my hands against the glass, desperate to escape, but it melted against my skin, pulling me toward the chaos that promised both salvation and doom simultaneously. "Please, let me go." The shadows screamed their approval. I felt the impact of countless souls pressing against me, suffocating and relentless. Suddenly, just as I dared to take a breath, a new figure emerged from the tumult. A woman, her face twisted in both agony and compassion, reaching out for me. "You have to remember to resist. They will consume you." Her warning was swallowed by the clamor of screaming voices that filled my head, drowning her out completely. The glass beneath my hand splintered, and I was thrust forward, pulled by the unseen hand, ready to be claimed. And then, just as warmth began to fade, everything unraveled, darkness racing in to meet me once more, stealing my voice, and I vanished into the howling void, an echo of dread tangled in its embrace. I hardly had time to think before an echo of the woman's voice resonated again, more fiercely now, cutting through the grim veil. "Find the truth of the light." The last remnants of my consciousness crumpled. The darkness consumed everything. My senses slipped, like grains of sand through trembling fingers, into that oppressive blackness. I hovered at the edge of consciousness, teetering on the thin line between nightmare and waking. The abyss whispered unspeakable secrets, reverberating with the agony of souls trapped in limbo, their cries interweaving with the incessant thrum of machinery that punctuated this forsaken realm. With a jolt, the ground beneath me solidified once more. I gasped, taking in my surroundings, an expansive, decayed hall with towering pillars of rusted iron, stretching endlessly beyond the boundaries of sight. A distant flicker of light danced at the end of the corridor, drawing me in with a magnetic pull. Yet, an instinctive dread coiled within me, convincing me that it wouldn't lead to salvation, but to something infinitely more sinister. As I hesitated, the echo of the woman's warning reverberated through my mind. Find the truth of the light. Against every urge to retreat, I moved forward, each step resonating with an unsettling clang, my heartbeat sinking to the rhythmic pulse of the darkness surrounding me. The flicker grew steadier, revealing hints of color that felt simultaneously captivating and grotesque: a sickly yellow, a deep crimson, like blood gleaming against the filth. The closer I drew to the light, shadows danced along the walls, grotesque shapes melting and reforming in twisted mockery, reflecting a parade of tormented souls that beckoned with their hollow gazes. I swallowed hard, forcing down the bile that threatened to rise. It was not merely the fear that subdued me, but a desperate curiosity for what lay at the end of this confusion. Suddenly, the light flickered violently, and in its brilliance, I glimpsed slumped figures writhing like marionettes with their strings severed, their faces turned toward me, mouths agape in a howling silence. They were disfigured and torn, trapped in an eternal state of suffering, each a fragment of what I might become if I succumbed to the chaos. Just as I was about to turn back, the light surged, casting white-hot rays that engulfed the room and illuminated something strange. Skeletal door molded into the wall, embossed with swirling patterns that came alive in the brightness. The door trembled as if it were conscious, splitting my focus between the encroaching darkness and the swirling possibilities hidden behind it. An insatiable urge filled me. I needed to know what lay within that door. Desperation clawed at my throat as my hand reached out, fingers brushing against the cool metal. Almost instantly, without any warning, the door swung open, revealing an enchanting sanctuary of luminous flowers and whispering wind, a deceptive paradise amidst the torment. But the moment my foot crossed the threshold, the air thickened, and the sanctuary twisted grotesquely. The ethereal blooms shifted, their petals unfurling to reveal rows of sharpened teeth, snapping in a disturbing symphony. The warmth of the place morphed into a suffocating heat as I reeled back, horrified. "Stay," a disembodied voice hissed, weaving through the air like smoke, curling around my thoughts, wrapping my mind in chains. I knew then that the allure of this light was deceptive, a trap designed to ensnare as it had countless others. With adrenaline surging through my veins, I turned to flee, my heart drumming wildly against my ribcage. But the sanctuary began to close in on me. The flowers writhed like serpents, and the once innocent petals reached for me, stretching sinewy vines that grazed my skin with icy fingers. As I stumbled backward, I sensed the chill of the surrounding darkness, merging with the horrors of the sanctuary, creating a vortex of despair and longing that threatened to pull me under. I could feel the shadows rising, hungry to reclaim me, plucking from my essence, feeding from my fear. "Do not leave." The voices, millions of them, forced their way into my ears, drowning me in 100 different tales of torment. They clawed at my mind, each one a reminder of the souls trapped in their perpetual suffering, pleading for release they could never attain. I turned once again, adrenaline fueling my flight as I darted back down the corridor, the decayed walls closing in, the pounding footsteps echoing like a funeral march. My heart raced in desperation. But just as I thought I could step into the embrace of the looming shadows, a figure collided with Might's face twisted and void of life. I staggered, gasping. But I was not alone. The chilling voice returned, this time a cacophony of lost souls erupting around me. "You cannot hide from the truth. You must face us." The very air felt electric, the proximity of their longing demanding my attention. I braced myself, resisting their whispers, fighting against the overwhelming urge to succumb. And for an instant, I felt clarity pierce through the fog, a fleeting thought of the woman with the agony-streaked face. In that moment of focus, a wailing crescendo erupted from the depths of darkness, rising to a fever pitch. The walls themselves began to contort and warp, devouring light and hope, until a blinding flash struck that I was hurled into the eye of the storm and the ground beneath me shifted violently, unforgiving. Raw terror gripped me as I fell into the inky depth, a descent into madness, propelled by the insatiable yearning of countless souls, each desperate for something lost in the infinite layers of suffering. And as I plunged into the void, one final realization pierced the chaos, a whisper of dread entwined with urgency. What if you were meant to seek the truth of the dark? The echoes of countless voices twisted around me, and my scream was swallowed by the vast nothingness that awaited as I plunged deeper, each heartbeat intermingling with the relentless cacophony. There was no escape, only endless darkness, and at its core, the whisper of hope and horror intertwined. I landed on something soft yet unyielding, a surface that absorbed my weight and exhaled a chorus of moans, wails low and guttural that echoed through the oppressive dimness. I rolled onto my back, disoriented, and blinked against the stifled darkness, where unsettling shapes lurked just beyond the reach of my senses. The air felt different here. It was thicker, alive, swirling around me with an oppressive weight that wrapped itself around my thoughts like icy fingers. Tentatively, I sat up, and my pulse raced with each labored breath. Almost instinctively, my eyes sought the flicker of illumination, any source of comfort in this abyss. There, a distant sickly light flickered, but instead of offering solace, it filled me with dread. Shadows danced against the walls, and in their rhythm, I swore I could see faces, twisted visages contorted in expressions of despair, looming closer and then vanishing, taunting me. Help us! Their voices were a morbid melody, drifting through the air, wrapping around my bones and gnawing at my soul. Find the truth! Find us! Their chorus was drowned in an overwhelming wave of emotion, fear, sorrow, desperation. I felt their wounds, tasted their misery. It churned in my stomach, twisting like a knife embedded deep within as more whispers erupted around me. Gaining intensity, I stumbled toward the flicker. Each step felt heavy and laden with an unseen denial. The closer I moved, the more tangible the darkness became, wrapping like bands of barbed wire around my mind, pulling me back, urging me to turn away. Yet ahead, the light shook, a beacon amidst the encroaching shadows. With every heartbeat, I moved forward, past the silhouettes that melted with despair, until I reached a narrow door. It seemed like it had emerged from the very walls themselves, wrought with intricate designs that writhed like the faces I had just glimpsed. Desperately, I grasped the cold handle, twisted it, and pushed against the door. It creaked open, revealing a dim chamber filled with flickering candlelight casting grotesque shadows that morphed and shifted. The scent of damp earth mingled with an intoxicatingly sweet perfume, creating a deceptive air of safety that hung heavy over me. Inside, an altar rose from the ground, draped in tattered velvet, black as the void around me. On top lay a small, ornate box, pulsating faintly with each unsettling flicker of the light, as if it were alive, yearning to be opened. A sense of foreboding rose within me, but curiosity, the relentless, aching curiosity, dared me to approach. Just before I reached the altar, my breath caught painfully in my throat as I glanced behind me. Standing at the threshold of the door, figures emerged from the shadows. They were the very embodiments of despair, their faces glossy and slick with sorrow, eyes hollow, vacant yet filled with an unholy hunger. They raised their bony fingers toward me, their lips moving in unison, chanting a haunting lullaby, echoing the incessant plea for truth. "Do you dare to uncover the truth?" they sang, their voices swirling around me like a cauldron of madness. "Or will you join us, like the others?" I felt the unearthly chill creep up my spine as my instincts screamed for me to run. But the box drew my attention again, a magnet pulling at the core of my being. Open it, it seemed to hum, the sound reverberating deep within me, awakening long-buried memories, faces, whispers, secrets better left concealed. With trembling hands, I reached for the box, captivated by its allure. I released the latch, and as the lid creaked open, an explosion of blinding light engulfed the chamber, shaking the very foundations of my sanity. I squinted against the brightness, and as it receded, I was faced with what lay inside a tarnished mirror, etched with grotesque depictions that writhed as if alive. Gazing into its reflective surface, I beheld a whirlwind of visions, faces from my past entwined with those of the anguished souls I had encountered. My own eyes stared back at me, hollow, jagged with despair. I was both seeker and sought, trapped within a vortex of existence rippling like water disturbed by the wind. Suddenly, the chamber trembled. The shadows surged forth in a frenzied cacophony, shrieking louder than ever, drowning out logic and reality. "You must choose," they howled, their voices intertwining with ghostly melodies that reverberated through my very essence. The mirror reflected the choice: either I would unravel the truth or plunge into the darkness, joining the souls bound to this place, forever twisting in agony at the cusp of decision. I felt a hand clasp around my wrist, cold and clammy. I turned, heart bellowing in fear, only to find a twisted visage leering at me, eyes like burning coals. "You cannot escape your destiny," it rasped. "The truth awaits, and so do we." The light behind me flickered out as shadows enveloped the space, drowning me in a tide of terror. But just before they could pull me into the inescapable abyss, the mirror unleashed a furious burst of energy, throwing me back a last chance, a final glimpse into the truth that lay hidden beneath the chaos. And as I lay on the altar, gasping for breath, the mirror shattered before my eyes, splintering into countless shards, each reflecting a different terror, each mounting the pressure of dread hanging thick in the air. The remnants of its fragments. I saw what lay at the core of my own. Darkness, stripping layers like peeling paint, unraveling truths I hadn't dared to confront. "You cannot unsee what you have already seen." The chorus erupted in a boil of voices, growing louder, demanding, enveloping me in their clutches. And just as I reached to grasp a shard, desperate for understanding, darkness seeped from the cracks of existence, swallowing me whole, culminating in the last agonizing thought that echoed through the void. What if the truth is far worse than the darkness itself? And in that moment, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping the cries of anguish within. As I realized I was not alone, something had come through with me. The remnants of the shattered mirror settled into an eerie silence, shards glimmering like the teeth of some monstrous creature waiting to devour me. I pushed myself up from the altar, nausea coiling in my stomach as I turned to grasp for a sliver of clarity amidst the chaos. The candlelight danced erratically, casting twisted shadows that writhed like serpents against the walls. I felt an unsettling presence lurking just outside the veil of my perception, a weight in the air that pressed against my chest, constricting my breath. A sinister energy pulsed through the chamber, mingling with the cries that echoed on the fringes of my mind. I forced myself to focus, to regain control. Each step out of the chamber felt like wading through thick, tar-like darkness, tendrils clawing at my limbs, eager to pull me back. I reached the door, dread pooling in my throat, and turned the handle slowly, the wood creaking like the groans of the damned. The corridor beyond was darker than before, a deeper, suffocating blackness that seemed to consume the weak flickers of light left behind. Something slithered in the shadows, and I knew this was no illusion. I was being hunted. Desperation clawed at my mind as I stumbled into the passageway, every instinct racing to escape. Yet the walls began to breathe, contracting and expanding, echoing with a heartbeat that wasn't my own. Each throb reverberated through my very bones, sending tremors of terror shooting up my spine. Whispers floated through the air, fragmented, twisting around my consciousness. Join us, they coiled around my thoughts, a seductive caress that promised understanding and unity with the lost souls. I shook my head violently, gritting my teeth, forcing my feet to move against the call of the voices as I rounded a corner. The dim light revealed a grotesque mural where the walls seemed to flesh out, depicting the same twisted faces I had glimpsed before, all mouthless yet screaming in agony, lost in a sorrowful dance of eternity. My heart pounded like a war drum, and with every pulse, I felt a seeping dread clawing its way higher, tightening its grip. A sudden chill swept down the corridor, and I could feel something was approaching, a darkness that coalesced into a form. I turned, heart racing, and beheld a figure standing at the far end of the corridor, obscured in shadows. It was vaguely human, but the contours of its body shifted unnaturally, like a reflection on broken glass, flickering between phantom and reality. "Come closer," it beckoned softly, the voice eerily calm, juxtaposing the chaos within. "I can show you what lies beyond." I instinctively took a step back, but the moment I did, the figure lunged forward, seeming to glide despite the grotesque writhing of its form. The air crackled with potency, warping around it as if the very fabric of reality responded to its presence. The whispers intensified, now a frenzied cacophony, drowning out every rational thought, every instinct shouting for me to flee. Stay, it breathed, and suddenly, it was right in front of Might's face, a swirling abyss, an unending dark space from which flickers of madness erupted. Within that void, I caught glimpses of tormented souls reaching, clawing for something: salvation, revenge. It was an unsettling reminder of my own frantic search for truth. But what truth awaited me here was far darker than I could have anticipated. In that moment of frozen horror, a shocking realization dawned upon me. The figure wasn't merely a manifestation of fear or madness. It was the tether binding each anguished soul to this realm. I could feel the pulse of their torment resonating within me, pulling me deeper into the shadows. "Let me show you," it whispered again, and I felt my will crumbling with its invitation that I turned to run. But I was met with a wall barrier of shadows solidifying into a mass that gripped my arms tightly. "You cannot escape," it seethed, a rasping tone that reverberated in my bones, causing my heart to race with unyielding fear. "You have chosen to witness. Now you must know." Desperation clawed at my throat as I fought against the grip. The chamber of torment, filled with bound souls, flashed through my mind, a reflection of their pain mingling with my own. The energy from the mirror's shards reverberated within me, a dissonance that surged like a tidal wave as the walls around me cried out in agony, thrumming with all the souls trapped within a prison of sorrow, reflecting my impending fate. Just as the darkness began to envelop me completely, I managed to summon an ounce of will. "I do not want this," I screamed, the sound erupting from me like a battle sea. Why did I? In an instant, the grip lessened, and I stumbled back, heart racing as I collided with something solid behind me. I spun around, ready to confront whatever horror lurked beyond. But I was met with a familiar sight: another door, wooden and scarred, standing defiantly against the chaos threatening to swallow me whole. "Open it," the figure urged, malice thickening its voice. "You have one last chance." The air hummed with tension as I faced the door. It loomed like a harbinger of either freedom or annihilation. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, urging me to make the only choice remaining. As I reached for the handle, suffocating fear enveloped me, when suddenly glowing eyes emerged from the shadows on either side, narrowing with wicked glee. Then I heard a voice echoing, both familiar and alien, penetrating the tumult. "You will never leave this place, not alone." And the door flung open with a force that shattered the silence, revealing a light that tugged at my soul, a white glimmer of hope or an engulfing void. I had no way of knowing. All I felt was the pull to enter, the figure laughing in delight behind me as the shadows surged forth. In that precarious instant, I felt everything fracture, reality bending as I lunged toward the light, a leap into the unknown, where the horrors of darkness entwined and the truth lay waiting. Would it swallow me whole, or would I emerge forever changed? As I crossed the threshold, a scream erupted, and in the blinding radiance, I glimpsed their faces, every soul, every tormented whisper facing me in their moment of truth. The scream morphed into a chant, echoing around me, reverberating through my bones. "You are ours now." And just like that, I vanished into the blinding light, hurtling toward a truth that was never meant for the living. The brilliance of the light engulfed me, dissipating into an unsettling haze that swirled like a tempest around my consciousness. Faces seemed to pulse in the periphery, each one twisted with horror, eyes glazed with despair. I instinctively reached out, desperate for something solid, but the light was a liquid, stretching and twisting forms into abstract shapes before they faded entirely. As I ventured deeper, the sensation of falling rushed through me, spiraling into an abyss where time and reality intertwined. I felt as though I was tumbling through a kaleidoscope of silhouettes, glistening fragments of memory flickering past, each drenched in unyielding sorrow. I grasped for clarity, but the more I fought, the more I sank. Then, abruptly, I landed on cold stone, falling onto a ground that was both familiar and alien. I gasped for breath, sharp and ragged, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The overwhelming dread clung tightly to me, but I forced my eyes open. A vast chamber stretched out before me, illuminated by a ghostly glow that emanated from the dark, swirling mist gathering at the edges. The air was thick, almost gelatinous, and it clung to my skin like a shroud. In the center of the room, a massive altar loomed, stark against the spectral light. It was covered with the same shards of the mirror that had haunted my waking hours, glinting ominously as if waiting for the blood of a new victim. Around the altar, ethereal shapes writhed, souls tangled together in a grotesque dance of torment. Their mouths moved soundlessly, the agony in their eyes pleading for release, or perhaps for revenge. Panic shot through meth darkness had claimed them, suffocating their screams under a veil of silence. "Welcome," a familiar voice reverberated through the spectral mist. I spun, my heart lodged in my throat. The figure from the corridor stepped into view, more defined here, its twisted features now a seamless blend of human and nightmare, with luminous eyes that locked onto mine with a gaze that pierced my very essence. "I see you've chosen to learn." "Learn what?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely rising above a whisper. I staggered back as the shadows danced closer, the anguished souls now towering over me, their cries echoing in the recesses of my mind. "Know this," it continued, its voice both melodic and terrifying. "Beyond this chamber lies the truth of despair that binds usual who have walked these halls, all who fell to their curiosity." The walls pulsated with its words, shuddering as though alive, and with each beat, the air filled with the weight of their collective sorrow, inescapable and stifling without warning. The floor trembled, a low rumble coursing through my feet as if the very foundation of this realm was unraveling. The murmurs of the tormented souls crescendoed into a howl, rattling the very fabric of the chamber. I glanced towards the way I had come, feeling something no. Someone pulling me back toward the threshold of blinding light. "Do not be foolish." The figure snarled, momentarily shedding its deceptive calm. Tendrils of shadow extended from its form, reaching for me with an urgency that was both desperate and malevolent. "You cannot escape the truth once it has been revealed." I quickly turned, abandoning the idea of retreat. My heart thundered as I advanced towards the altar, drawn inexplicably closer to the ominous shards, their jagged edges shimmering with promise and peril. The spells of the restless souls weaved around me, latching onto my limbs, their cries becoming a discordant chant that seeped into my thoughts, urging me closer. "The power lies here," the figure insisted, its voice smooth now, intoxicating like a whisper in the dark. "Join us, and you will discover the fate that awaits." One last glimpse, a revelation that surpasses even your deepest fears. Ignoring the clamoring warnings in my mind, I inched toward the mirror shards. They vibrated with an energy that felt alive, a pulsation that resonated within my being. Intangible memories flashed before my eyes, images of those who had sought the same truth, each swallowed by despair, but not before a fleeting glimpse of something greater, darker. A voice screamed among the cacophony, echoing with the desperation of those who had gone before. "You don't know what you're inviting." But I hesitated for only a moment before thrusting my hands toward the shards, the need for understanding overpowering the dread coiling in my gut. The shards erupted with a blinding flash, illuminating the chamber in a searing brightness that swallowed the shadows and cast primal fears across the walls. As the vibration grew to a deafening roar, I felt the walls begin to shift, my senses overwhelmed with the pull of lost souls rising around me. Their anguished faces contorted, merging with the light until everything went still. With a shattering sound that reverberated through the fabric of existence, darkness erupted from the mirror shards, releasing a torrent of souls, their cries piercing through reality in a surge of anguish. And then, in that moment of impending chaos, I felt a hand latch onto my wrist, cold and unyielding, yanking me back into the shadow, the figure's malicious laughter echoing in triumph. "You can never leave this truth behind," it hissed, tightening its grip as the chamber quaked with an all-consuming dread. I screamed, ripped from the light, and dragged back into the very depths of despair I sought to escape, knowing that in the battle between curiosity and the unknown, darkness had claimed victory once again. I opened my eyes to confusion, the air thick and heavy, drawing me back into the familiar sense of dread that lingered. Where was I now? The walls were gray and scarred, shadows clinging to every corner, wrapping around me like a shroud. The spectral glow had faded, leaving an unsettling residue of coldness that prickled my skin. My heartbeat pulsed in my ears, an echo of every moment spent in this curse, the horrifying cycle of darkness and despair that threatened to consume me. As I pushed myself up from the ground, I noticed the shapes, once swirling phantoms, now crystallizing into forms I recognized, all the faces of the damned, their eyes wide with longing, agony woven into the very fabric of their existence. Their presence was palpable, like a tide of misery crashing against the very edges of my sanity. "Welcome back," whispered a voice, nasally and chillingly familiar. I turned to find a figure from the corridor, its ghastly visage twisting, a mockery of humanity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Did you think you could escape your fate?" A dread clawed at my heart, forcing down the bile rising in my throat. "What do you want from me?" I managed to croak, each word laced with the weight of terror. The chamber felt alive, breathing, pulsing around us as if mockingly echoing the plight of every lost soul. "You are part of this," it mocked, gradually stepping forward. The ground beneath seemed to ripple, shadows growing denser, pressing against me like a confining straitjacket. "You opened the door. You sought the truth, and now, you are bound." A sudden clarity surged through the fog of fear. I remembered that fateful night, the thrill of my curiosity, the choice that led me straight into the maw of darkness. It was never just a figment of my imagination. This curse had beckoned for every soul who dared to unravel its secrets. "No," I whispered, the realization crashing into me like ice-cold water. I turned, looking past the specters and my tormentor. "You're lying." But the darkness was relentless. The figures surrounded me, their mouths moving in silent pleas and feral screams, their outstretched arms yearning for the same truth I sought. Memories flashed behind my eyes, flickering between reality and the elusive veil where I foolishly wished to tread. The figure stepped closer, its form ever shifting, and with the certainty of its glee, it hissed, "You cannot escape. You are us, forever entwined in this cycle." Panic surged, desperation clawed at my heart, and I surged toward the altar, stumbling over forms of despair, trying to escape the pull of doom that was tightening its grasp around me. I had a choice, a real choice this time. I tore my gaze away from the haunting figures, glancing back towards the shards that whispered tantalizing secrets of the past. They gleamed with an allure I couldn't resist, a gnawing curiosity that demanded to be fulfilled in full awareness of the horror. Suddenly, a tortured wail escaped the shadows, louder than before, an amalgamation of cries for help that echoed against the walls, drowning my resolve. "Find the truth!" they screamed, their voices chilling to the bone. "You must choose, face the darkness or let it consume you." Trembling, I took a step toward the shards. Each one was a viable fragment of despair, reflecting the twisted path of countless souls. I raised my hands before them, shivering as the light began to pulse, drawing me deeper into their wretchedness. "What are you hiding?" I demanded, heart pounding with the realization rushing forth like tidal waves, each heartbeat a reminder of their sufferings infused within my own. As I laid my hands against the shards, the ground beneath me trembled violently, and the walls groaned as if rebelling against my presence. Images flooded my mind, each shard showing glimpses of my lost companions, faces contorted in anguish, all of them staring back at me through their prison, begging for salvation. "You are not here for the truth," the figure hissed, its fingers curling over my arm with icy warmth, sharp and tinged with darkness. "You're here to join the cycle." "No!" I roared, ripping my arm away. The shards vibrated as the shadows screeched in unison, anger swirling around me like a tempest. For every one of their anguished cries, the shadows thickened, grasping greedily at my ankles, pulling me further toward the altar, the nexus of this horror that threatened not just me but the very essence of what remained of my sanity. In that moment, everything shifted. The cries of lost souls coalesced into a single heartbreaking whisper, a truth clearer than the lies I had once invited. I had never merely observed, I had become a part of it. The echoes of the past clashed violently into the trembling core of my being, fusing their darkness with mine until I could hardly discern one from the other. Your choice is inevitable. The figure coiled back, its laughter intertwining with the moans of the tortured souls encircling Melost watchers of the truth who had also once dared to look behind that door. Then came a thought or revelation that churned beneath the suffocating pressure of despair, slicing through the remnants of fear. I had taken a path that twisted around every corner of the dark, a descent mirrored in every shattered face that had journeyed before. This was never simply about passing a threshold. It was about a truth that formed the very foundation of this cursed cycle. Hope and despair danced in this abyss as one does, and so I fought. With every ounce of will, I flung myself up from the altar's draw, embracing the pulse of lost souls that surged through my veins. You will not consume me. A terrible roar erupted around me as shards exploded, releasing a torrent of brilliance that pushed the shadows back momentarily, allowing the air to thrum alive with light that shattered through the murk of hopelessness. Each spectral face momentarily revealed itself, contorted in anguish but easily identifiable my own face among them. Waiting on the precipice of forgetting to end that fleeting luminosity, I felt it an unraveling, a confession to the entwined existence that found solace only in surrender. With one last push against the tide of darkness, I cast myself beyond, shattering the very cycle my soul had become entwined with. It began to fade, and with a shrill echo of cries, a singular truth echoed across worlds entwined, creeping into every fissure in time. You cannot unlearn what you've beheld. Everything went dark, and in that darkness, a cool whisper brushed against my ear, echoing that which first drew me in. Welcome back, punctuated by a sinister laugh that reverberated against the walls of my psyche. For I was never free. I had merely become part of the shadows. As they danced around me, mocking my desperate grasp for light, a horrifying realization took root within me. Not only was I trapped, but the truth was closer than ever, nestled among the cries of those I would never leave behind. And in every chilling shadow that lingered, I heard their whispers just waiting for the next fool to open that door.